So I get a question often from people around cutting the cord and what it means and what the implications are. So I thought it was probably worth us having a chat about what it is and how to do it and what the benefits are. So Keith, why don't we start with you? What is cutting the cord? What does that mean to you?
So when we used to talk to clients about cutting the cord, the goal was really to just figure out if they wanted to unbundle their services and get away from paying somebody like Dish or DirecTV or their cable provider a bunch of money for a package of channels, or did they just want to pick and choose what they actually were going to watch?
Kevin, have you unbundled? Have you cut your cord?
No, I wish I could say I was because I was in the same boat that Keith kind of talked about. I wanted this to get rid of all the excess channels that I never watched and never used. The reality was is I needed to have some of the live content that those service providers provide. And I ended up roping myself into my Netflix, my Disney Plus, and my ESPN Plus, and all the other things that I wanted to have. So I had everything. And I think if anything, it just ended up costing me more money and a little bit more confusing on where I find everything.
I mean,
Don't
basically,
do
what
that
we
math.
yeah, exactly. So but
Yeah,
basically, what we're talking about is cutting the cord idea was to cut the link with your cable provider and to say, I don't want to deal with them anymore. We don't like Comcast. We don't like whoever it is. But the basic thing that has to come into the house is internet. And I don't
mhm.
know of another way of getting fast internet. I mean, we all use cable, I guess, to get the internet, don't we?
I think that's right. Yeah, you can look at AT&T with fiber, you can look at Xfinity service, and if you cut those services, then you have to go to something like a Starlink or a different service along those lines, and we're then streaming all that content coming in, and you're in your own set of challenges that comes along with that. I think if anything, when you cut the cord, you're essentially just cutting the bundle of television package that you bought, and you maintain that service connection coming in because it still is one of the best and most reliable ways to get a fast internet service that we all need, and ultimately what's needed for the streaming services that you'll want when you don't have the prepackaged television plan that you used to have.
Well, and just like with most things, as soon as that idea sounds so good of just piecemealing together what you want, but it's just cheaper for companies to offer us packages. And the very first day that you've cut the cord and you get like, I'm only going to have Disney Plus. That sounds great until the show you want to watch comes out on NBC. And now it's only available on NBC or Peacock. And then you have to decide, well, do I want my bundle of services? Or do I just want Disney and Peacock? And then when you run out of those shows, maybe somebody else in your house wants to watch something on Netflix. And pretty soon you're bundling yourself, like you're piecemealing, you're paying more for each service. And I guess those are bad examples because even if you had cable, you'd still have to buy half of those anyways.
Right. Now, and if you're a live sports fan and you have a local team, it may be, I mean, we should talk about using an antenna. And I know that that works for us, it might not work for other people. But practically none of those, the Hulu, which is a combination of NBC and ABC, or Paramount Plus, which is CBS, or Peacock, which is just NBC, or the Fox one, almost none of them have the live sports on. And so you're gonna, if watching NFL, watching baseball, you're either going to have to subscribe to a very expensive package, which, by the way, won't show you your home team when it's in its home market, or you're going to have to find another service that provides that capability.
That's right. Yeah, and like you said, while you may get some out of if you live in Austin like yourself, Nigel, and you're an Eagles fan or a KC fan, well then it works fine because out of state teams. But like myself here in Houston, if I wanted to watch the Texans, which I don't because they're terrible, but if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to watch them. I'd have to get an antenna to bring that service in, or I'd have to go through Fubo TV and set up an account with them and try to find a live stream that I'm picking up somewhere. And it just becomes a hassle. It becomes so difficult to try to find that content and it changes. And so you'd have to find that in different places all the time. I think one of the interesting things that happened when we started to try to cut this cord was that content really became the challenge. Where do we find this content? And you have manufacturer or you have Netflix creating Stranger Things, and you want to have that comes out of it, or you have a special program that's only available on HBO, and so now you're streaming it from that side. Or if you love Premier League soccer, you can watch it on USA Television that way, or you pick it up on Peacock. But the same game is not available on both of those things. So it almost forced us in to finding content in so many different areas. And it really, I think, if anything, it kind of backfired on this concept that we were going to get rid of all these services, and it almost forced us into more things that we need to have to get the content that we want than it was to kind of simplify our lives and get rid of that.
That's been my experience. I mean, it's amazing because I am a Premier League fan like you, and it's amazing that I can watch every single game that's played, but I have to do it across multiple services. I have to have my cable provider and I have to have Peacock. And so it's interesting because it is like we are getting a better service. Like Netflix is generating and creating really cool content. There is just a cost associated with it. And right now we're currently paying the old model cost and the new model cost at the same time. It'll be interesting to see where that ends up.
Now, what I know a lot of people do is they get YouTube TV, and that's not YouTube, but it's effectively the bundled cable channels from YouTube that runs on their Apple TV or the Google Chrome device, or they get Hulu or one of those other services. My experience of those services, they're great, but they're not that much difference in price than the cable provider, and they're actually quite hard to use.
Yeah, I think that's been my experience, and I think maybe a happy middle ground for people would be maybe paying for a cable provider and having a cable box or a satellite box in one room in their house, like the most used TV, and then using those bundled services, and that might allow them to drop the cost of renting the equipment down to be something more comparable with YouTube TV, but still having a place they could actually watch their cable provider and then have access to log into all of those apps to stream whatever they want to watch. But I think the point Kevin's about to make is like we have a really good system. The cable and internet services are reliable, and moving over to something like YouTube TV, you're now adding all of that backbone onto your network and not getting the ability to just bring it in straight from your provider.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen a number of times where if someone's getting ready to kick the game-winning field goal, and then all of a sudden, because of internet lag or consumption bandwidth in
Mhm.
the house, it pauses and then it picks up 15 seconds later while they're celebrating or while they're, you know, consoling each other
Yeah,
in misery because it was a missed field goal. But
Now,
so
having
it's really remarkable how that's changed and how
but
that
having
works. And
said
I
that,
think the other thing, yeah,
I
go
was
ahead,
going to say
Nigel.
no. Just having said that, if you have kids who have laptops or computers and don't have TVs in the room, it's really hard to get the cable service to them. And something like YouTube TV or one of those sort of bundled over IP services, they call them, is actually quite a good way to watch television on your laptop, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely a positive. And I think that we're seeing how content is consumed has changed. I mean, I look at my kids and, they would rather look at they'll sit on my sofa in front of an 85-inch TV and they'll have their iPad in their hands and they'll climb all over the top of each other to watch a small little screen as opposed to watching something big in the room. And it's because that's how they consume their content now. And they have it all right there. It can be YouTube TV, it can be a Netflix show or Disney Plus or whatever app they have going at the time. And they consume their content that way and they enjoy it. And I think that works for them. And it is convenient. It works whether they're in front of a TV or whether they're in their rooms or whether we're traveling or even on a road trip, it works that way. And so it is a good alternative to have service that's coming in that's mobile and that's able to be picked up in different
yeah.
mediums. Yeah.
That might actually be the dividing line right there. Like if you're primarily consuming your content on your TV in your home from your couch in a really traditional manner, maybe cutting the cord doesn't make sense at all. But if you're primarily consuming your content from mobile devices, then that might be a good reason to push towards cutting the cord for you.
Now, the Super Bowl came was on TV. And we've cut the cord, so we don't have a Fox service. We don't pay for Fox. And actually, I don't know I can pay for Fox without a cable subscription, the app on the Apple TV. But I live downtown in Austin, Texas, and I have an antenna, a little black plastic thing that sits behind our console system. And that brought in really good a picture of the Super Bowl. And there are plenty of devices there. TiVo has one. I've got a list of them here. There's Tableau, there's Silicon Dust, if you live in a place where you get good television signals, then you can get the main channels off an antenna and merge that in. And that's also quite a good way if you, and by the way, those things have DVRs in them. So you can record CSI Vegas, NCIS, or whatever it's called, or whatever it is on CBS. So you don't necessarily have to go without those programs, but you're not going to get Food Network or Discovery or any of those things that way. Talk about this and control systems. I mean, I use an Apple TV, which is quite a complicated way and it's lots of button pressing. If people have like a control system in their house, what's the best solution there?
Yeah, I think for the most part, control systems are designed around using the cable providers and then the bigger streaming boxes like Apple TV, Roku. So if you want the most convenience, it's probably going to be through either your satellite or cable provider, and then streaming through an Apple TV or Roku device. When you get in to try and use those services on a smart TV or something like that, you get into a really weird experience that changes day to day, changes device to device. And I think for most people, that level of frustration, unless they really enjoy playing with technology, is just not worth it.
Yeah, I agree with Keith. I think that when you deal with, you know, a control system or a system that's trying to aggregate your technologies in your home, it's really made to have some sort of a black box that provides that content or that brings that content coming in. In fact, the benefit for customers, talk about having a TV and just streaming through the apps that are built in a television, like the TV audios aren't good anymore. It's very muffled. The quality is not better quality. When we have a control system or we have separate speakers, being able to have a singular device that brings in the audio management and the video management together makes that a much more pleasant experience for um, while you're watching TV. You know, you can change the volume to the same interface as opposed to having to, try to do things on the back end of it. And not to get too technical, but to try to route the audio from a TV back to a sound system and then have that play through speakers in a room, that can get incredibly complex and very difficult to use. And while having that accomplished at that point, you've kind of given up the ease of use and the convenience of just simply being able to pick up a remote and watch TV.
Right, and if you're a big music streamer, you then give yourself another complexity because now you want to play Spotify or something, and lots of those control systems integrate that into it. But if you're watching TV and then people start playing Spotify on the TV, it's not going to work on the speaker. I mean, how do either of you use streaming music, and how do you integrate that into your homes?
Yeah, in our house, we have another black box, like Kevin mentioned, that's just for streaming audio that connects to our control system and allows us to play music throughout the house. Those services exist on our Apple TVs, but that's not how we use them.
Yeah, similarly, we use streaming music all the time. In fact, I would say we probably play more music in our home than we do actually watch. And we do that through a control system that we have, and it's able to bring in Pandora and Spotify and iHeartRadio and whatever content we really want to have come into it. And so it makes it simple that way.
So when we're talking to a homeowner, about a house, I know when I'm talking to friends in the building that I live in a building with hundreds of apartments. The first question is, what's most important to you? What do you watch? And that seems to be the starting point, I think, for most of us on this conversation. What do you watch? What do you listen to? And how complicated do you want to make it?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to start it. I actually think starting the conversation a little bit different than that actually helps kind of guide how we get into it. I think oftentimes I ask how uh, are you watching this from a TV, and is it important for you to have higher quality audio so that one, you can hear the audio better from what's actually happening on the television, and making that work together. And is making that simple and easy to use, is that kind of an idea of how we want this to go together? And then we will help them, we will guide them or help guide that conversation into how do we actually get that to work together. And it may be that streaming content is the right solution for them, and we do that through an Apple TV or a TiVo box or the apps built within a television. Or it might be that, we have one primary television in the home and everything else is just kind of consumed off of iPads throughout the house. And so streaming services really make sense for them. Be that, hey, we're traditional. We sit down on the sofa or in our chairs and we watch TV that way and kind of guide it that direction off of it. And so a little bit of it is the mixture of audio and video together, and then where are we actually consuming that content so that we can help them get to the right place there.
Yeah, I think for most of our clients, they're after an experience. And I'd say for the vast majority of them, that experience is I want something that's convenient, that's rarely going to limit the choices I get to make. And so for most of those people, they probably do want some sort of cable service or satellite service. And they're probably going to also have streaming services as well. They're going to combine that. And that's going to give them the buffet and the open bar at the same time
Yeah.
versus having to go in and order the individual items they want off the menu when they want them. And I just think, to me, that's the biggest driver is if you are really, really worried about budget and that's your primary driver and you're willing to make sacrifices, then yes, just pay for the few apps that you think you need. But I think for most people, within 6 months or a year, they're going to go from 1 to 2 apps to 4 to 5 to 6. And that's when you just need to kind of step back and look at what the decision you've made and see if it's still a good fit for you. I know for me, I thought I needed cable and Netflix. And now I'm paying for cable and another $50, $60 a month in a dozen different services that I may or may not need. But
Yeah, and I know we try to be strategic about it and say, billions is on Showtime. So we'll wait until all the billions episodes have been broadcast or released, and then we'll sign on to Showtime for a month and we'll try and binge watch them. And that's a great strategy because there's only 10 episodes. So, we could do that in 2 or 3 days, and it always takes us 3 months, and then we forget we've subscribed to it and we're paying for it for another year. So those are the things. But I'm fully in favor of finding the buffet and the open bar that Keith
Mhm.
offered there, and I think we should all spend some time there. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I'll meet you both there.